Byron, you're chief political correspondent, Washington Examiner, and a Fox News contributor. And Byron, good morning to you. You've been watching and reading for 3 days, as we all have. What does this mean right now, based on what we know?
Wow, this is a huge, new, totally unpredictable factor in this race. We knew that the race was actually tightening before Director Comey's revelation on Friday. Go back to about the time of the last debate, about 12 days ago. Hillary Clinton's lead over Donald Trump in the Real Clear Politics average of polls, national average four-way race, it was 7.1 points. This morning, it's 2.4 points. This race has gotten much closer. It is close in some battlegrounds. The average is exactly tied in Florida. Trump has a little lead in Ohio, but Clinton still has a substantial lead in places like North Carolina and Colorado and Pennsylvania. So, I mean, the race is clearly getting tighter, and this has thrown a huge new unpredictable factor.
Let me just show our viewers a little bit about what you're talking about, okay? Byron, on the map behind us here, where you look at the scenario for trying to get to 270 electoral votes, and we have said for months now that she has the advantage. She has the inside track, right? And Trump has a much more difficult task. But I tell you what, Byron, we keep coming back to Florida. I mean, look where this is right now. This is all the polls put together. She's at 44.4%. He's at 44.4%, all right? My attention keeps going back to Florida and Ohio. It also goes to North Carolina, too, because based on what we're seeing, she apparently has some sort of edge in North Carolina, at least based on the polling. And it's possible that this could be our focus come 8 days from now, Byron.
Absolutely. I was just in North Carolina a few days ago. The Democrats have a very strong effort really pushing early voting there. First Lady Michelle Obama went to North Carolina on Thursday to appear with Hillary Clinton. President Obama is going to be there on Wednesday for Hillary Clinton. So they are really pushing hard. They think Donald Trump absolutely has to win North Carolina. If he doesn't win the presidency.
15 electoral votes, Tar Heel State. Maybe it's the new Ohio or Florida or both. Thank you, Byron. We'll talk later. Byron York analysis there in Washington.
Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are now demanding briefings from the FBI on these newly discovered Clinton emails. As all this plays out, the impact could potentially tip enough down-ballot races to change the balance of power in the Senate, which the Democrats are very much hoping to win back. They are targeting a group of vulnerable Republican senators, including Marco Rubio and Kelly Ayotte. You see the rest of them on the screen. But one seat that has been considered a fairly easy pickup for Democrats in Wisconsin has now become somewhat more competitive. The Republican incumbent now closing the gap there in the polls as Democrats pour millions of dollars into this race to hold on to that seat or to get that seat. Ron Johnson, chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, joins us now. Senator, welcome. Good to have you here this morning.
Good morning, Martha.
Good morning to you. So, you know, a lot of people looking at this news and wondering if it has an impact on those very tight down-ballot races, including your own.
Well, it just might. You know, my opponent, Senator Feingold, might be one of the last remaining Americans who thinks Secretary Clinton is trustworthy. And, of course, he actually has his own email scandal. He was a special envoy of the State Department and communicating with, for example, John Tester, head of the DSCC, probably talking about his election while he was a State Department employee. So we've asked, there have been number 4 requests, I was saying, for 2 years, and the State Department has not released those. But what we're seeing here with this investigation is it was bungled from the start. If you look at the immunity agreements, consider those things to Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson, you would almost have to conclude this investigation was not meant to uncover the truth and prosecute, but more likely to cover up and exonerate. And so this has been bungled. It's pretty simple, too, Martha. There's 2 statutes dealing with federal records. You know, you cannot conceal, you can't destroy them. And by the way, that statute is penalized by fines, imprisonment, and disqualification from holding any office of the United States. And then also a statute that deals with any kind of information records dealing with national defense. Both of these things completely apply to Secretary Clinton's situation. I think she's guilty of both.
The Secretary is right. And that is that the American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails.
Thank you. Me too. Me too.
That moment was exactly 12 months and 18 days ago, and the FBI apparently today cares about those emails. To what extent, we wait to hear. Congressman Trey Gowdy, member of the House Judiciary and Oversight Committee, is with me live today in Greenville, South Carolina. And thank you for coming back here on America's Newsroom. It's been reported that there could be as many as 650,000 emails on Anthony Weiner's computer. If that is true, can you say that the deleted 33,000 on behalf of Hillary Clinton's own server are part of that cache?
No, sir, I don't think anyone can say that. They can tell you what the metadata says, but I don't even think the Bureau agents have read these emails, and I certainly have not.
Have you considered that possibility?
I hope that all records that are considered public records will ultimately be made available. But keep in mind, Bill, we're talking about decisions that Secretary Clinton made years ago that prompted you to even have to ask that question. I want the entire public record to be complete, whether that's classified information or whether it's a benign email about Yemen. These are public records, and the public is entitled to them.
Is a president-elect under an active investigation on behalf of the FBI, is that individual eligible for a security clearance?
I think so, Bill, under the theory that the ultimate security clearance check takes place on November the 8th. The President of the United States does not have to go through a security background check, just like members of Congress and U.S. senators don't have to go through a background check. If the voters elect someone, that is tantamount to having a security clearance.
So if she wins a week from tomorrow, then she will be privy to whatever national secrets are necessary for Commander-in-Chief to know, correct?
Yes, sir.
On Friday, you issued a statement, and you said Director Comey's statement was instructive. What do you mean by that word, instructive?
Well, Bill, there are other ways the head of the FBI can notify Congress that an investigation has reopened. In other words, his explanation was that he was supplementing the record. He had previously said the investigation was closed. He wanted to avoid the problems that Commissioner John Koskinen has now because he did not supplement the record. My point was he thought it was important enough to not just tell Congress that the matter had been reopened, but also tell the public. And I think the reason he did that, Bill, is keep in mind Secretary Clinton and her acolytes for months now have been saying the FBI cleared me, no wrongdoing, the investigation is over. Well, if she were to continue saying that in the week before the election, Director Comey knows that that is not true. So if he knows it is not true, then why should the rest of us who are having to decide what to do on November the 8th also not know that that is true?
Alberto Gonzales, former Attorney General, was on earlier today. And what he said was that there's very little with this investigation that is consistent with protocol, suggesting how the Department of Justice operates, how the FBI operates. Is that true, sir?
Bill, unusual and difficult facts make for difficult conclusions. But most of these facts were given us by Secretary Clinton, not by Jim Comey. I mean, I'm sure former Attorney General Gonzales and former Attorney General Holder will tell you that having Loretta Lynch meet with the spouse of the target of investigation on the tarmac is unusual. I am sure they will both tell you that having the current president prejudge the outcome of this investigation while the investigation was ongoing is unusual, and heavens knows having the commander-in-chief actively campaigning for someone who is under FBI investigation is unusual. So everything about this is unusual, and all of it is...
What he went on to say is that since the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, recused herself, that you now have James Comey essentially left to himself to pursue this. That in itself is highly unusual. Has that ever happened before?
Yes, I think it actually has. I think Eric Holder had to recuse himself. Now, Loretta Lynch has a very, very capable top deputy in Sally Yates. So it doesn't go from Loretta Lynch to Jim Comey. There are other people in positions of responsibility in the Department of Justice. It is unusual for an FBI agent to also make charging decisions. The agents make recommendations, and then the prosecutor makes the ultimate decision. So it is unusual, but why are we here, Bill? We're here because Loretta Lynch met with the spouse of the target of the investigation. That's not Comey's fault. That's Loretta Lynch's fault.
Last night, you referred to Senator Harry Reid after he issued a strong statement against the FBI director. You called him a political hack. Do you stand by that today?
Oh, if I can't really use the word I want to use because it would get us in trouble with the FCC. Yeah, so we'll just go with political hack.
Why is that? Why do you use that phrase today?
It is laughable that Jim Comey committed a violation of the Hatch Act. I actually know what the Hatch Act is. And if the President of the United States actively campaigning on company time for another candidate to be President of the United States is not a violation of the Hatch Act, then how is Jim Comey supplementing the record and telling the truth to Congress a violation of the Hatch Act? Harry Reid knows that this is not a violation of the Hatch. This is the same guy that went on the floor of the Senate and said Mitt Romney didn't pay taxes. So he is a political hack, and I would say more than that if I weren't going to get fined by the FCC.
Trey Gowdy from South Carolina today. Sir, thank you. We'll see where it goes from here.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
A new poll showing a third of likely voters are less likely now to support Hillary Clinton because of this news, 34%. Although part of the poll was conducted before the latest bombshell. It kind of hovers over the days surrounding this Thursday and Friday. Jason Miller is Senior Communications Advisor for the Trump campaign. Jason, good morning. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me on.
Wow. What was your reaction when you heard the news on Friday?
I mean, this was an earthquake. I mean, it had been a big week last week with the Obamacare news and then also with the Clinton Inc., the $66 million plan to use the Clinton Foundation to enrich the Clintons. But when we saw this news on Friday, I mean, this was really big. I think what it really spoke to was this sense that voters have of this rigged system and that something really stinks with the whole investigation into the Clintons. And then now as we're finding more news, even later yesterday when we found out that there were some 650,000 emails that were on this laptop. I mean, how do we get this far in the process where we don't find a laptop from Hillary Clinton's top aide, and then the news that Bill mentioned a moment ago that it was used to back up Huma Abedin's smartphone.
That's right.
And this is, and there were at least, obviously not all of those 650,000 emails were between Secretary Clinton and Huma Abedin, but there were thousands, at least as far as the Wall Street Journal story.
Raises a lot of questions about the FBI's initial investigation and why this device wouldn't have been gathered during that phase of all of this. Let's play another soundbite from your candidate, Donald Trump.
Her number one person, Huma Abedin, is married to Anthony Weiner, who's a sleazeball. I don't like Huma going home at night and telling Anthony Weiner all of these secrets, okay?
So that was back in July. He was pointing out that there could be security concerns with the relationship that they have with the Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner. But the story is that you guys told Mr. Trump, look, stay away from Anthony Weiner. Don't talk about that. Not going to help you.
Well, actually, it's funny you put up a clip from July. If you look back to August 31st of 2015, Mr. Trump tweeted that he had these same concerns with security issues and national security and classified information, talking about Huma Abedin and being married to Anthony Weiner and all the craziness that was going on there. But look, like I said before, this really goes to this bigger picture issue of what exactly was going on here. I think that the FBI is doing the right thing by reopening this investigation, by going through it. Clearly, there's a mountain of evidence for 11 days out to reopen this and dive back into it. They wouldn't have done that if they didn't think there was something extraordinary that they had found.
Just over a week to go till Election Day. Hillary Clinton's lead over Donald Trump seems to be shrinking. Brand new battleground numbers are out in North Carolina. Let's take a look here. It is a must-win state for Donald Trump, and the Real Clear Politics average. Oh no, this is the NBC Wall Street Journal poll. Excuse me, the latest number that we have for North Carolina, 47-41, as you can see. But in the critical state of Florida, it is a dead heat according to the brand new numbers from the same pollsters, 45-44. For Hillary Clinton and well within the margin of error. So that one is neck and neck. Let's bring in Karl Rove, former Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Karl, good morning. Good to have you with us today. So
thanks, Martha.
Tell us, how do you characterize the race right now?
Closing and closing rapidly. Let's take a look at the Real Clear Politics average, the two-way. This is Clinton versus Trump. Take the other minor candidates and move them out.
Yep.
As you can see, they started at the 1st of October. She'd had a dreadful September at 2.7 in the Real Clear Politics average. After the first debate, that ballooned up a little bit. After the release of the sex tape on the 7th of October, it grew to 6.7. That was, as of Friday, 5.2. As of today, 2.9. So that's without all of the effect of of Friday's announcement by Comey. The race is naturally going to close because of the nature of what happens in the closing days of a presidential campaign. But the Friday announcement is going to accelerate that, and the question is how far will it close and who ends up in front on election day. But this is a pretty dramatic change, as you can see, in just a few short days.
Talk to me about Florida.
Well, look, you used you gave her a 1-point advantage using the 4-way. I like using the 2-way, in which it's a tie. I mean, since there have been 8 polls since the 25th of October that go into the Real Clear Politics average. He's led in 3, she's led in 5, but the result is a tie. Now, and she's collapsed because, you know, as recently as the 22nd of October, she was about 5 points ahead in the Real Clear Politics average. Here's how to think about Florida. Florida, first of all, let's think about it from Romney's perspective. Excuse me, from Trump's perspective. If he takes the Romney states with 206 and he gets Florida with 29, then he's at 235. He's still got to find 35 more in order to get there. Look at it from her perspective, though. The red wall. 18 states and the District of Columbia that have voted Democrat in the last 6 presidential elections in a row. That's 242 electoral votes. If she holds those plus Florida, then she's at 271 and she's president of the United States. So he's got to win Florida to keep alive. If she wins Florida, it ends the contest. She's got other ways to get to 270, but if she wins Florida and keeps the red wall, then she's president.
So now the announcement of this new phase of the FBI investigation in the Clinton server has been in the spotlight since Director Comey made it on Friday. A bombshell revelation just days before the election that could have a big impact on the race. Is the media handling it fairly? I want to bring in Howard Kurtz, Fox News media analyst and host of Media Buzz. And Howie, how you doing? Good Monday morning to you. Great program this weekend. Now, how do you see this so far based on what you watch and what you read?
Remember when we used to talk about Hillary Clinton had to win the FBI primary? Well, now apparently there's been a recount. And, you know, at first it was treated like the bombshell that it was, saturation coverage, and a kind of an alarmist tone in the media. This could not only utterly change the media and political environment, but it really could flip the race to Donald Trump. In the last 2 days, Bill, I see a dramatic shift toward much more skeptical reporting on James Comey and the FBI. That's driven in part by Hillary Clinton and her people attacking the FBI director, but also by a gusher of leaks.
Okay, and you believe fairly in your view. How come? What changed?
Well, you know, I think the press is doing a little bit of self-correction because there's so much that we didn't know when this erupted on Friday afternoon. Now, thanks to various kinds of leaks, we are told that James Comey broke with long-standing Justice Department policy and over the department's objections by commenting on a criminal investigation so close to an election. We also found out now that at the time that Comey sent his letter to Capitol Hill, he didn't know, the Bureau didn't know what was in these zillion emails because they hadn't yet obtained a search warrant for it. So that raised the question for some about why he would go public without really having the goods. And then finally, you have this question. Remember, this hasn't been officially confirmed. The New York Times, the first to report that these emails came from the devices of Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner, turning up in a sexting investigation. And that kind of added a surreal and almost a comical twist to this very serious matter.
Do you see a difference in how conservative commentators and liberal commentators are approaching or reporting this story?
This is side-switching hypocrisy, and you see it on both sides. Back in July, when Comey declined to prosecute but did harshly criticize Hillary Clinton for handling of classified information, you know, the liberals and the Democrats and even the Clinton campaign were hailing him as just a paragon of law enforcement virtue, and conservatives very upset, and the Trump campaign very upset, saying this was a horrible decision on the part of James Comey. Now you see an almost 180 by many, many people who are commenting on this. So you have the Trump campaign now basically saying this was a great decision by Comey and putting aside Trump's earlier talk of a rigged election and a rigged FBI investigation. Conservative commentators joining that as well. And on the liberal side, the Democratic side, and among the Clinton supporters, Comey, who had been, you know, again, so widely praised, is now being described as a partisan Bush administration Republican hack who is unfairly trying to influence the election in the closing days.
Well, Howie, get back at it, okay? And let us know what you find out. Howard Kurtz there with analysis on the media on this breaking story in Washington. Thank you.
As you may remember, the Clinton campaign and other Democrats sang FBI Director James Comey's praises when he cleared Hillary Clinton on July 5th of any charges.
Let me just say this about Director Comey first. This is a great man. We are very privileged in our country to have him.
I want to begin by commending you and the public servants at the FBI for the independent investigation.
I greatly appreciate the work that the FBI and Department of Justice did, and they handled it very professionally.
The FBI, under the direction of a wonderful and tough career public servant, Jim Comey, somebody with the highest standards of integrity.
Now, it's a bit of a different story now after Comey notified Congress of a new phase based on evidence that had been put before him last week. Now listen to this.
It's pretty strange to put something like that out with such little information. It's unprecedented, and it is deeply troubling.
You violated these two protocols. You owe the public full information.
What a difference today can make, right? Former Clinton pollster Bernard Whitman is author of 52 Reasons to Vote for Hillary and president and CEO of Whitman Insight Strategies. And Lisa Booth is president and founder of High Noon Strategies and a Fox News contributor. Welcome to both of you. So, Bernard, the person that they praised, they have now switched their opinion on quite drastically.
Well, Martha, great men and great women can make mistakes. And Director Comey made a huge mistake by announcing unprecedented and probably illegal action. That announcement was full of innuendo, and it was a gift to Donald Trump, who has based his entire campaign on taking half-lies and falsehoods and spinning them into truth and feeding them to his supporters. And that's exactly what's happened here. And this is the type of government, frankly, that we could expect under Donald Trump, where you use the mechanics of government to wage political war against your opponents. He promised to do that in the debate with Hillary Clinton last month, promising to investigate her and lock her up.
That's a bit of a stretch.
No, it's not. This is exactly the type of government that we get from when fascism starts to seep into democracy.
Okay. Let's try to stick with the issue at hand, which is the question of James Comey and whether or not he acted correctly. You can't extrapolate that to what a future presidency might look like when we have, many years of history to examine in terms of what Clinton's in public office has looked like over the course of this. Go ahead, respond.
No, and Martha, what about a government where you have a future presidential candidate facing an FBI investigation, or a president, for that matter, facing an ongoing FBI investigation? And look, I find it absolutely, it's insanity for Hillary Clinton, the Department of Justice, and the Democratic Party to question protocol, to question the quote-unquote unprecedented actions of FBI Director Comey, when you have Hillary Clinton herself, who took the unprecedented actions of setting up a private email server, using that in a private email address exclusively, deleting tens of thousands of emails using BleachBit, and then lying about it all. And also, Martha, real quick, if you don't mind, the Department of Justice and Loretta Lynch taking the unprecedented action, compromising herself and the integrity of the Department of Justice by meeting with Bill Clinton during an ongoing criminal investigation.
Okay, all of that is part of what's baked in the cake here, Bernard. And I just want to bring up an issue that jumps right off of what Lisa has laid out there, and that is the fact that when Loretta Lynch met with Bill Clinton on that tarmac, she pushed this whole thing over to James Comey.
That's right.
So why now, when there's new evidence placed on his desk, should he go through that chain of command on the same case? Loretta Lynch already said, this is your baby, Jim Comey, and he said, case closed, and now he says, look, I have to reopen based on what I've got in front of me.
Jim Comey did exactly the right thing, and according to all the reports, listened to his top 20 investigators and said, there's not enough here to go forward with the recommendation for indictment. He then went on to opinionize and serialize and editorialize by talking about her conduct after the fact. And then in this letter, which 100 Department of Justice officials have railed against, Judge Jeanine Pirro of this network, Judge Napolitano of this network,
no, it's very controversial, and we have laid out both sides.
This has politicized and besmirched the reputation of the Justice Department. It's unprecedented, it's unethical, and it's wrong. It's fundamentally against the rules of fairness, basic Justice Department guidelines, and impartiality to step inside a presidential election to influence the votes on behalf of another campaign.
I hear what you're saying,
exactly
but one can only, there's so much we don't know, and as Jim Comey has said, the investigation into these emails is just beginning, but there has to be a compelling reason why he felt that if he didn't do it now, to have this come out after the election would make him look like he had been derelict in his duties, Lisa.
Well, absolutely, Martha. I think he's between a rock and a hard place. There's no easy answer here or necessarily a right answer because, as you mentioned, if he puts this information out after the election, how is that going to look as well? But to Bernard's point, it is just, I am beside myself at the fact that Democrats can look you in the face, look viewers in the face, and say something like that without holding Hillary Clinton to these same standards, without holding Loretta Lynch to these same standards. I mean, that is utterly ridiculous, and we should all be very concerned at the fact that we have someone who is running to be president of the United States for the first time in American history, facing an FBI investigation, who previously faced an FBI investigation, which is still open. And Martha, to that point, there are tens of thousands of emails that are still out there. How do we know that something else isn't going to pop up months from now?
We don't. Lisa, Bernard, thank you guys. Thank you very much. More to come.
Another of the FBI Director, James Comey. Martha, thank you. He's in the middle of the fire right now. Former federal prosecutors, senior Justice Department officials, including the former AG Eric Holder, writing the following, quote, "Many of us have worked with Director Comey. All of us respect him, but his unprecedented decision to publicly comment on evidence and what may be an ongoing inquiry just 11 days before a presidential election leaves us both astonished and perplexed," end quote. At the same time, Trey Gowdy, congressman from South Carolina, slamming Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid's claim that Comey's decision to announce this new phase broke the law.
Harry Reid knows that this is not a violation of the hack. This is the same guy that went on the floor of the Senate and said Mitt Romney didn't pay taxes. So he is a political hack, and I would say more than that if I weren't going to get fined by the FCC.
So that was Gowdy from last hour. This hour, the judge, Anna Napolitano, with me here, and also from New Hampshire, the former Governor John Sununu, former White House Chief of Staff to President George H.W. Bush, and author of the book, The Quiet Man. Governor, stand by one moment. Want to examine the politics with you. First, the legal side of this with the judge next to me, and good morning to you.
No.
You believe the FBI director was wrong.
I do.
Why?
I believe, and it's an odd company for me, but I agree with Attorney General Holder. It is absolutely unprecedented to give a progress report on a criminal investigation. It is prohibited by the Department of Justice regulations. It's prohibited by the FBI regulations. It's prohibited by legal ethics, and it violates due process. What are the regulations? The regulations say you keep quiet about the progress of an investigation. You report your evidence to the Justice Department. The Justice Department decides what to do with it. The regulations also say you do not make a public announcement about a person running, about the criminal investigation of a person whose name is on the ballot within 60 days of Election Day unless it's necessary to save life or diminish violence.
That's what the law says?
Yes.
Maybe the evidence is so overwhelming that he could not ignore this.
Well, that's why it's so perplexing, Bill, because he hadn't seen the evidence at the time he sent the letter.
But apparently, based on what has been reported, they were looking at this a month ago.
Yes, but they hadn't told Director Comey about it, nor had they seen the emails, unless they viewed them unlawfully, that are pertinent to Mrs. Clinton. They certainly had seen the emails that were pertinent to Anthony Weiner because he gave them his laptop. But the search warrant authorizing them to read the emails between Mrs. Clinton and Huma Abedin, or Huma Abedin's emails that she forwarded to herself, whatever their source, wasn't signed until last night. That's why Jim Comey himself, and I share Eric Holder's respect for his professionalism, though I believe he made a serious blunder here. That's why Jim Comey himself said in the letter, I don't know the significance of it. So why give a progress report about evidence you haven't seen and that you can't evaluate into somebody you don't work for? He works for the DOJ. He doesn't work for the Congress.
Okay, now I remember him saying intent. Let me come back to that in a moment. To the governor, first of all, what is your sense about how this plays, knowing we select a new president a week from tomorrow?
There are two time frames. The short term is political, the long term is legal. But what this does, whatever way this plays out over the next few days, it is going to emphasize this culture of corruption and culture of deception that seeps through everything the Clintons touch and is now seeping through the whole Democratic Party. It's how the DNC tucked it to Bernie Sanders. It is why in Virginia they had the gall to raise money for Terry McAuliffe to send to a state senator her campaign when she was the wife of the deputy director of the FBI. It's a culture of corruption that they have to deal with in the next 7 days.
Okay, so was Comey wrong? Do you believe, or sorry, do you agree with the point the judge is making here?
I think Comey was between a rock and a hard place. This was going to come out Friday if Comey put it out, or Saturday if it was leaked by the FBI agents who were furious. And he understood that. And I think in order to preserve the integrity of the FBI, he had to come out with it Friday.
Wow, is that a possibility?
Yes,
Judge?
yes. Jim Comey was facing, and in fairness to the governor who's got his finger on the pulse here, Jim Comey was facing a revolt by young FBI agents and retired FBI agents, not because he was sitting on evidence about Hillary Clinton, but because of the damnable decision he made on July 5 not to prosecute her when the evidence of her guilt at that time was overwhelming.
30 minutes ago, Karl Rove was saying he was wrong in July and he was wrong now. You would agree with that in a word, correct?
Absolutely.
Governor, go ahead.
Judge, there's one more point I think you have not given enough weight to, and that is the fact that this made it very clear that Huma Abedin lied when she said there were no emails on other devices. And if I were in the director's chair, I would say, oh my gosh, that is a clue to the depth of the climate of corruption that goes across this thing. And I think he had to put it in a proper context to people he had reported to, namely the American public and the Congress.
Well, he reports to the Justice Department, not to the Congress. But again, I agree with the governor.
But he had reported to the public.
I haven't seen the affidavit that the FBI presented to a federal judge here in New York to get him or her to sign a search warrant, but I'm going to guess it had to do not with Mrs. Clinton, not with Anthony Weiner, but with whether or not, as you said, Governor, Huma Abedin lied to the FBI. That is the doorway that they will use to enter these emails.
To gentlemen, to both of you, thank you for your time. We're out of it for now. Time, that is. But, Governor, thanks. Judge, thanks to you.
Fox News Alert with developments on our top story as the FBI obtains a warrant to look over more than 650,000 new emails found on devices that may have been used by Hillary Clinton's top aide, Huma Abedin. There is new fallout about what could happen if Clinton does win the White House after all of this. Joining us now, Greg Jarrett, Fox News anchor and former defense attorney. So the prospect of a sitting president being indicted, or perhaps being indicted before winning the presidency, is actually out there.
Yeah, it is out there. Probably not before, but after she were to take office, assuming she wins. And what's interesting is there is broad constitutional immunity against prosecution for ordinary crimes for any president. It's even in the Federalist Papers. The framers talked about that. What they didn't talk about, and legal scholars have never contemplated, is what happens. Does that immunity apply for acts that are committed before somebody assumes the office of president?
So if Hillary Clinton wins the presidency and somehow is indicted, and I know a lot of people are saying that's not going to happen, but if she somehow is indicted, she wouldn't face charges while she is president.
No, she wouldn't. She could invoke the immunity. Now, that might end up in a lawsuit, and judges, including the Supreme Court, might have to weigh in on it. She could pardon herself. You're allowed to pardon yourself. You can pardon anybody. Nixon thought about pardoning himself. In the end, he decided not to. Ford did it for him. But that would be political poison if Hillary Clinton were to do that.
So there's a lot of talk about the Hatch Act these days. Harry Reid is all upset about what he perceives to be Richard Comey, Director Comey's, James Comey's violation of the Hatch Act. What is it?
Well, the Hatch Act was a law passed in 1938, which says a public official, except president and vice president and a few others, cannot use their position to influence an election. Well, look, there's no Hatch Act violation here. There's no evidence that Comey intended to influence the election. Sure, his decision to announce this may have that effect, but he didn't intend to. By all appearances, he intended to simply correct the record before Congress, his sworn testimony, in which he said the case was closed. Obviously, now it is no longer closed, and he was duty-bound to tell them that. But look, he was in a no-win position anyway. If he didn't disclose it, he'd be accused of violating the Hatch Act by protecting Hillary Clinton.
Right, and if the FBI had some information, developed some information that might bear on her fitness to hold the highest office in the land, and didn't release it before the election. I mean, isn't it something that voters would have wanted to know?
Well, but that's more of a political judgment call. And Comey, the indication is, was simply looking at the law. I have information that Congress needs to know because I told them something that's no longer true, that the case is now open and active. And, you know, he must have seen something on Thursday when the feds showed him these documents that alarmed him and said, wow, now I've got to reopen this investigation. I have to tell Congress it's open.
Now, I know you've written on FoxNews.com about what happens if Hillary Clinton is elected. It doesn't appear that there's going to be a honeymoon period with Congress.
Right.
And, in fact, investigations into the email situation and other possibilities could start right away. Her husband was the second president ever impeached.
Right.
Could she be impeached over this email?
You cannot be impeached for conduct that happened before you became president. Impeachment only applies to actions taken during the course and scope of your duties as president of the United States. But look, she could be, you know, dead in the water and disabled the same way Nixon was during Watergate. He squandered the trust and goodwill of the American people, could get nothing done with Congress in terms of meaningful legislation. There will be continuing investigations by Congress, assuming Republicans hold the House, into bribery, obstruction of justice, perjury, fraud, illegal use of a nonprofit charity, i.e. her foundation, pay for play. All of these are active investigations which the chairman of the various committees in Congress have vowed they will pursue and pursue vigorously.
And if memory serves, she was a young lawyer who served the committee, working the Democrats on the committee, impeaching.
She was. And, you know, one wonders, did she learn nothing from the Nixon scandal, that power tends to corrupt and you have to sort of behave yourself? You know, most people who are enveloped by scandal learn from one scandal.
Yeah.
Clean up your act. Stay away from it. Hillary Clinton, it's one after another, whether it's Qatar Futures or Whitewater or Travelgate or emails or Benghazi, the list goes on and on and on. It is one after another.
The FBI director described it as what? Bad judgment, very bad judgment in his remarkable news conference.
Assuming, John, that there are classified documents on these new emails that were sent or received by Hillary Clinton, that doesn't mean necessarily she'll be indicted or charged. The same result as before we could have yet again.
Greg Jarrett, Fox News anchor and attorney. Greg, thank you.
Sure.
Jenna.
Well, how has the media covered this new Clinton email story? Now that the FBI is looking through thousands and thousands of these additional emails, we're going to take a fair and balanced.
Yeah, campaign bombshell. The FBI reopens its investigation into Hillary Clinton's private emails.
Joining us now, Tammy Bruce, radio talk show host, and Leslie Marshall, syndicated radio host. Both of them are Fox News contributors. So all of a sudden, the media are paying attention to this presidential race in ways they haven't before. Tammy, you almost get the feeling that for a lot of media outlets, it was a little boring watching this, 10, 12-point Hillary lead. And now all of a sudden they're paying attention to it, making it more of a horse race.
Well, look, I think that it took a lot of energy to keep it at that supposed 12-point lead. You had actually a huge spectrum from Investors Business Daily and the LA Times poll at 1% or tied, all the way up to swings up to 12 and 15 points ahead. And that takes a lot of work to keep that going. At the same time, remember, prior to this latest drama, Obamacare had hit. And this is, of course, it continues to hit. It continues to destroy people's lives economically. This is a part of the liberal agenda of what it is that Americans are getting tired of and are feeling in the pocketbook. The jobs issues are still remain. So economics were a big deal. And yet at the same time, you had the big day when the discussion about how high the new premiums would be on Obamacare. There was not one story in the Washington Post on that story. So there's a lot of energy and a lot of thought that goes into what not to cover as much as what goes into what to cover, especially when it comes to the bias that exists with the media these days.
Leslie, I suspect you see it somewhat differently.
Well, I do see it differently because obviously if everybody was in cahoots to have Hillary win, you would not have seen those headlines that we saw or the trending on Twitter. Sorry, Donald Trump, you were wrong about that. Huma Abedin, Anthony Weiner, Clinton, October surprise, all trending over the weekend on Twitter. Quite frankly, I think any network, whether they're cable mainstream media, if they're a newspaper outlet, they want to make money. They're a business. So they're going to lead with something that their viewers or their readers are going to be interested in. And quite frankly, if we look historically at the last presidential elections in modern day, it is normal for the race to tighten in a couple of weeks before the election because we're pretty much almost a 50-50 divided country, largely partisan, Republican and Democrat, and that's how we see people vote. Even Hillary Clinton said it's going to be a very tight race a while ago, and quite frankly, even though there was a 12-point lead, we know the polls have gone up and down, and we have seen in the primaries that not all the polls have been 100% accurate.
Tammy, what do you make of the criticism that the FBI director is getting? He had essentially closed the book on the Hillary Clinton investigation, that extraordinary news conference back, I think, in July. Now, all of a sudden, he says, hey, let's open it up again. We've got some new information, and he is getting pilloried by Republicans and, by Democrats and some Republicans.
Yeah, look, the reason he had to have that strange press conference way back at the first investigation was because of the meeting of Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton on that tarmac. She met with the spouse of a target during an investigation, which is, of course, extraordinary. So he was put in a very political position. In this particular case, we know the New York FBI agents had looked at the emails in the Anthony Weiner laptops and the Huma Abedin laptop there for weeks. Clearly something had occurred, and Catherine Herridge actually has just reported on our air that, in fact, the metadata shows that there are Hillary Clinton emails there, and many likely classified. So this becomes something very serious for Mrs. Weiner. It becomes even more serious for Hillary if, in fact, that there are classified documents on that laptop. Then now they have to figure out where that laptop came from, what else it's mixed in with. So I think he did it because he had to. And keep in mind, John, that not doing something is also an action. Yeah. So whether he did something or if he waited, both are choices. And so I think what he did was what he would do under any case, that this was serious, it mattered now, and he needed to report it.
Leslie, isn't it the case that, well, it appears we have lost our connection to Leslie?
I had nothing to do with that.
She's been bleach-bitted out of existence, I guess. Okay, well, it appears we've lost our connection to Leslie. We apologize to our viewers for that. Tammy, since you're still with us, I'll just ask you this question. Sure. I mean, isn't it the case that Hillary Clinton really has no one but herself to blame for the situation in which she finds herself? I mean, everybody is attacking the FBI director, but if she had never used this private email system, which she has acknowledged responsibility for and apologized for, none of this would be happening right now.
Well, of course. I mean, the Clintons have it, both Bill and Hillary Clinton, their tendency is to blame the messenger. So we've seen this as being one of their strategies. And for Mrs. Clinton, look, she's learned in a lot of ways from her husband, who has been the politician, if you will. And I'm a feminist, and I give women all the credit in the world for causing their own success and their own problems. But she has been moved through a swamp of Washington, D.C. that in a way creates these kinds of monsters. And a lot of people try to resist it, but this is why there's such success with Donald Trump's Drain the Swamp, that it's an environmental systemic problem, and they happen to be representative of it. So yes, of course, she is the author of her own destiny. All of us are. And at the same time, she is always in a place. Her husband's known as the comeback kid. She can do certain things here that I think she's incapable of to turn it around. I don't think she'll do it, though.
All right. Tammy Bruce and Leslie Marshall. Leslie, sorry, satellite got cut off, we guess, but not intentional. Thank you both.
It's about Cosentix.
A Fox News alert and a new revelation from WikiLeaks that could impact the interim chair of the DNC, Donna Brazile. In the past, you might have heard of stories of Donna Brazile leaking questions to the Clinton campaign as a CNN contributor. She worked for CNN in the past, and over the time of the conventions, the Democrat convention, she became head of the DNC. And WikiLeaks, in previous leaks, seemed to show that she was leaking some questions to the Clinton campaign that would be asked as part of a CNN event. Megyn Kelly asked Donna Brazile directly about this just about a week ago, and Donna Brazile denied this claim. Now we have a new email from WikiLeaks, and we're going to show you two parts of this. So in this email, Donna Brazile writes to the Clinton campaign's John Podesta. The subject line is, one of the questions directed to Hillary Rodham Clinton tomorrow is from a woman with a rash. In the body of the email, it says, her family has lead poison, and she will ask what, if anything, will Hillary do as president to help the people of Flint. Now remember, Donna Brazile denied claims she was feeding any sort of information to the Clinton campaign. That's the email. During the debate, this is what happened.
After my family, the city of Flint, and the children in D.C. were poisoned by lead, will you make a personal promise to me right now that as president in your first 100 days in office, you will make it a requirement that all public water systems must remove all lead service lines throughout the entire United States, and notification made to the citizens that have said service lines?
I will make
We're working through the WikiLeaks documents. We've reached out to the DNC for a statement. We'll keep you updated as we get more. John?
So Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are running neck and neck in the final stretch of the presidential race. According to one new national poll, Clinton leads by just 1 point in a four-way matchup. A new NBC poll from Florida gives Clinton just a 1-point lead in that crucial battleground state. And another NBC poll has Clinton 6 points ahead of Trump in North Carolina. So how do we digest all of this? Brad Blakeman is a former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush. William Pierce is a former field director for the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
William, to you first. The Clinton campaign has suggested that these new revelations about Hillary Clinton emails being on a computer that her aide, Huma Abedin, shared with her, estranged husband, Anthony Weiner, that all of that has been processed by voters, that they don't really care about the email scandal, or if they do care, they've made up their minds how they feel about it. The problem with that is we don't know what those emails say. I mean, we don't know what is contained in this new computer revelation.
Exactly, John. We don't know what they say. We don't know if they're incriminating or if they're not incriminating. The fact is that this move is unprecedented, and I would actually go as far as to say it violates the Hatch Act, because the FBI director, he's not supposed to get involved in an election, especially this close within 2 weeks.
Brad, give us your take on that. We just discussed that with Greg Jarrett a little bit ago, but do you think the FBI director has violated the Hatch Act here?
Nonsense. Hillary brought this upon herself. Running for president is voluntary. And by the way, you don't get a pass on running for president when you've committed or possibly committed yourself or the ones closest to you criminal violations of law. You don't get a timeout for those violations. And the FBI does not take a pass or stand down. Their job is to investigate. And wherever the chips may fall, that's the way it goes. And, these are the same Democrats who are lauding Comey as a hero and a patriot, and now they're demonizing him. The fact is that there certainly must be, John, substantial evidence for the FBI director to do what he did. And he didn't do it alone. He didn't do it in a vacuum. He did it because his rank and file came to him and said to him, this is what we have, and the FBI director made that announcement. So it's not done in a manner that is not backed up by evidence. And soon we will know what that evidence is.
Go ahead. John, even in the director's own letter, he says, I don't even have any information if this is completely true, or if this is not true. He says, and I quote, he cannot yet assess whether or not this material can be significant. So we don't even know what is going on right now. And basically, this is the thing. It's 2 weeks before the election. We said, why does this have to happen right now, not 2 weeks later on down the line?
But, William, if the shoe were on the other foot and the FBI director had some information, some emails about Donald Trump and held them until after the election, wouldn't you be crying foul?
I'm crying foul right now because we have direct evidence linking Donald Trump with Russia, and instead the FBI is refusing to do anything about that.
Nonsense.
Yes,
come
there's
on.
direct evidence
Absolute
linking
nonsense.
The Republican. It's not absolute nonsense, okay?
Yeah,
we
it
have
is.
direct evidence. We even have
What is
evidence
the
going
evidence?
as far as people.
What
okay,
is the
fine.
evidence?
The evidence inside. The evidence is directly that Russia is working with
what evidence?
Key employees inside of the campaign. Okay,
Who?
we even have direct evidence linking it. You have the
Who
former
are the employees?
chairman. You have the former chairman who just mysteriously stepped down after this evidence came out. He has worked.
William, just along those same lines, Jenna Lee just had the update. There is evidence that Donna Brazile was feeding questions to the Clinton campaign to the disadvantage of Bernie Sanders during the debate season. I mean, you know, these fingers can point a lot of different ways here.
Yes, they can point in a lot of different ways, but this is the thing. Right now, we have an FBI director who has said and did a huge press conference and said, I'm closing the book. Now the book is mysteriously being reopened 2 weeks before the election. Don't you find that evidence suspicious?
All right, Brad.
Yeah,
what's the new evidence?
There's new evidence.
No one knows
but
what
here's
the new
what we do
evidence
know. Here's what we do know. The Democratic Party is more dangerous to the political process than the Russians could ever be. Why? It's because they tried to rig the nomination for Bernie. How do we know that? Because we have leaked emails that came out, and we know that because the DNC chair at her own convention had to resign. And then the incoming chair leaks questions to Hillary in violation, certainly, of all the ethics and normal conduct that you would expect from a party leader. So it's not the Russians I'm worried about. It's the Democratic Party. And you should be worried about it, too.
Brad Blakeman, thank you both. We'll see what happens a week from tomorrow.
Thank you.
So for the very latest on the 2016 election, keep it right here on Fox News Channel and join us Tuesday, November 8th for Election Day. Complete coverage throughout the day and into the night of all the big races. It's all here on Fox News Channel. Do not miss our coverage.